All right, there you go.
Continue. Oh, I forgot. This is not the touch. This is the. Okay, got that one. Yeah, I got that one. I got one more to do, and I'll be set to go.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're in business.
All right, sounds good. All right, it is 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock your time. And if you're ready to start, I will let everyone in.
Okay.
All right, have a good class.
All right, thank you.
Well, welcome tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, Franz is going to do some botanical drawings for us. We had intended that we would be outside enjoying nature, but Mother Nature had other plans, so it's a little bit dreary in Franz's neck of the woods, as is it in mine. So we brought the fun inside. So I still think that you're going to get a lot out of this class this evening. So I will turn things over to Franz. He will be conducting the class for you this evening. If you have any questions, you may chat those to me. If I don't know the answer, I will ask Franz to answer directly, but he doesn't have visibility to your questions themselves. So I'll do my best to answer them. And like I said, if I don't have the answer for you, I'll shoot it over to Franz and let him field that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. It's all yours, Franz.
Hey, thank you, Krista. Well, welcome. As Krista mentioned, I had this whole thing planned. We're going to very dramatically start from where we are right now. And then my son was going to hold a camera and we're going to make a dramatic exit out of my place and then start drawing outside, wave to everybody and have some fun. But it's raining. And so I don't mind getting wet and everything. But when it comes to using watercolor, I don't need extra help that way. And especially with all the electronic gizmos we need in order to conduct these Zoom things, I thought, well, we'll stay inside, but we'll still have fun. I thought I'd just talk a little bit about generally first about plein air. Plein air really came into being. I mean, people have always kind of enjoyed drawing, painting stuff outdoors, but it really was a big hit during the Impressionist period in the late 19th century. And I thought it would be an interesting fact to tell you about the development of some of that. You know, the idea is that you're going outside and instead of, you know, being in your artist studio and working with models and all that stuff in your studio, you actually go outside and you paint or you draw, you create your masterpieces while you're actually outdoors. And one of the things that aided that, especially with the painting, with the French Impressionists, was the recent invention of the tube. And what actually happened is that somebody came up with a formulation for toothpaste and they invented the toothpaste tube. And some enterprising artists thought, get rid of the toothpaste and put paint in that, and it would be so easy to take all my paints out into the field with me. And they had collapsible easels and all that, and those are all available to you at this point. But I thought you might think a little bit of, you know, kind of what's involved. So when I'm here in my studio, I've got big tables, I've got space to put all my materials, but when you're on the go, a lot of times you'll have to kind of consider a little more specifically what the limitations may be when you work outside. So my favorite thing to do outside is work in my sketchbook. There are all sorts of different size sketchbooks. Here's one that's about 5 by 7. It has really good paper in it. This one is my favorite. I have a tendency to favor the smaller ones just because my drawing scale is not that much bigger than this. It's very manageable. I could easily store it away. So you don't necessarily want to have something that is just huge, just really too big and too cumbersome. You want to kind of think a little bit about the realities of your situation. So something, let's say that you decide that you're going to do some pastel work. Maybe instead of taking your full sticks and taking your full range of colors, that you might consider half sticks and maybe a few fewer colors, because you can always kind of blend them together and create new colors with them. And this is much more portable. Another thing that if I'm doing watercolor, well, first of all, like a lot of times when I'm out, I like doing these kind of botanical studies. I like doing plants and leaves more than landscapes and whatnot. And we'll get a little bit more into what I do there. If I'm not doing that, I like to go outside, sit on a bench, and just do some of my goofy little drawings. I was trying to work on drawing my cat, and I was using Pitt pens, and those are India ink formulated. They dry, they don't make a horrible smell, and what's really nice about them is they don't bleed through to the other side. But then once I'm done drawing with the key black line, I like to use watercolor. So instead of taking a whole set of watercolors with me, these are Albrector watercolor pencils. And so what I like to do, they're really vibrant. They're really nice as a color pencil, but what's nice is that I'll take a couple of scrap pieces of paper, I'll put a selection of some of my favorite colors on it, and then I'll take a water brush. This has a water reservoir. It has a nice tip on it, a brush point. And so if you squeeze it a little bit, you get water in the tip, and then you can turn those bits of pencil from the Albrector watercolor pencils. And so I've got like a little portable pan set of watercolors here that I can use. And then, if I make these even smaller than the examples that I have right here, I can have about a stack of 10 of them. I can put them in my sketchbook or my wallet. And if I ever get back to flying, I just have my travel brush, my sketchbook, a pen, and these, and my whole studio is there. So I can also do the studies that I like doing with the plants, but I like using color Pitt pens, and we'll be getting to that near the end in order to do the botanical things I like doing. All right, so what I thought we would do, since we can't go outside, if we could switch over to the iPad camera for just a minute. I thought since we are unable to travel abroad, I thought, well, we'll let, I was going to say let the broad come to us, but that doesn't sound right. So this is a tin castle that I had when I was a youth, and it was one of my favorite things to play with. So I set it up like a little landscape because I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the basic things that would help you if you're working out in the fresh air, but working more on a landscape type of thing than if you're looking at detailed things like the plants that I'll be showing you a little bit later on. So the things that I wanted to discuss in this is that anytime you're kind of working outside over a distance, in order to get a certain sense of the space of that distance and the way that you might order it, there's 6 basic things to keep in mind. And these are often referred to as distal or distance cues. And I thought we'd go over them. And I kind of tried to set something up here that would be what I'm talking about. So first of all, let's talk about size variation. So you'll notice that we have a cow here, but then way in the distance, we have another cow. And this is not a pygmy cow. This is actually another cow, but over distance, things that are similar, that get smaller and smaller the farther you go away. Much the same, this ogre, this is actually the giant from Jack and the Beanstalk. He's standing here, taking a break, enjoying some flowers, petting the cow. And then up here in the tower, you can see the guard that's up there. And that guard looks considerably smaller than the giant. Well, the giant is a giant, but on the other hand, you know, the person back there is not that much smaller, but because that person is farther away, it implies that there's a distance there. So if you think about any time you've been up on top of it, you know, on a skyscraper looking down, you see the little ants, you know, those aren't ants, those are people just the same size as you, but because there's such a distance between you and the people you're looking at, that distance makes them look smaller. Okay, so that's one thing that you can keep in mind. Overlapping is a second thing. So if you have, we'll move him over here. So you can tell that he is in front of the cow because he's blocking your view. He is overlapping. He's intruding between you and something behind. So that implies space. And then if we switch him around a little bit and he comes over here, then you can tell that the cow is in front. All right. So that's number two. We'll put them back over here so we can enjoy the flowers. Now, the position in the page. So if you think that you're working on, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to make something look photographic. You're not necessarily trying to make something look super realistic, even kind of in terms of more abstract approaches, this still works. But if you think about taking the space that's here, all this space, and compressing it onto a flat piece of paper, then you have the top of your page and the bottom of the page. And the things that are closer to the bottom, I mean, if you think about the viewing screen that you have in front of you right now, you know, on my screen, this is kind of right the limit right there, about there. All right, so there's that's the bottom edge. And then as I start actually going up, the first thing I hit is where the giant is. And then I keep on going up a little bit more and I get to where the cow is, and I'm going up again and I get to the back of the castle, and then I get to the guard up in the tower. So it isn't so much going from here to here, but on a flat picture plane, it's like this is at the bottom of the page. I come up and all of a sudden I come across and that's where he is. I'm going up vertically. So his feet are closer to the bottom than the cow's head. So the distance from the cow's head going vertically from down here is greater than from, you know, like his knees. So his knees definitely are closer to you. So that's another thing, that the farther down on the page you get with something, it's implied that it's closer to you. Okay, so we've had size variation, you know, the cows, overlap, you know, whoever's in front of somebody else, then that shows that they're in front, position to the page. Another thing is detail. So if you're looking at something that is closer to you, you'll see a lot more detail. But then as you go farther away into the distance, and if you go, you know, really far away, you're going to lose a sense of the detail. So we're still close enough to the castle here that we can see the mortar joints. But I'm sure if you imagine being outside and looking at a building that's made out of brick, if you're standing right there, you can see the mortar joints, you can see the individual bricks. If you look at something that is down the street that's made out of bricks, it may just look kind of like a reddish color, and you're not going to necessarily see the crispness or the exact detail of the mortar joints. So if something's farther away from you, you're going to draw it in less detail. You want to give the impression of something, Whereas if it's really close on top of you, then you're going to be more apt to want to put the detail in. Now they have, there's another thing called perspective. Some people are aware of it, some of them aren't. When we kind of get back to me sketching things out, I'll describe that a little bit. But essentially what's happening is that you can see it a little bit in the towers that, we have the wall in between this front tower and the back tower. And you can even see that, with the way that the camera is set up and everything, it looks like the height of this tower is higher than the height of that tower. So again, the size is diminishing it. But what is happening is that the parallel lines between this wall and that wall appear to be coming together in the distance at a point, and that is perspective. So if straight lines that are parallel have a tendency in the illusionary world of the picture plane, your piece of paper, to come together to a point. And I'll do a very quick variation of that very quickly when I start doing a couple demo drawings here. And then the last thing is often referred to as aerial perspective or intensity modulation. But essentially, the farther away something is from you, the spectrum of light that's being reflected bends enough that you start losing warm colors. So things have a tendency to become a little bit more on the blue range, and they also get to be less intense. So it's just a function of the way that your eye works in relation to the way that light bounces off of things over a distance. So essentially, if you kind of think about maybe looking out across a valley or something to mountains that are in the distance, instead of those mountains necessarily looking, like really craggy with a lot of detail, with a lot of intense colors, it's going to be more kind of blurred away, and it's going to be more like kind of a tonal thing, more grayed out than if you're actually dealing with something that's close up to you and it could be very brightly colored. So those are 6 things to kind of keep just in the back of your mind. Essentially, when you're outside drawing, a lot it has to do with observation, but those are some guidelines that if you're kind of wondering why things aren't going the way that you want, or if you're thinking ahead of time how to set something up, then those are some issues that you might keep in mind. Okay, so if we could now go to the overhead camera, we'll do a little kind of drawing here to talk about. The one thing I forgot, if we go back to the iPad for just 1 second. All right, if you would like, take a picture of that, and then you can have it on your phone as a reference if you want to kind of follow along a little bit. So give everybody a minute or two if you feel like it. If not, then you can make something out of your own head. I'm going to use it as a reference point just to kind of talk a little bit more about what we were going over. Okay, so I'm hoping everybody has a picture. So now we can go to the overhead. All right. Now I'm gonna work with pastels for this, and I kind of want to go over a little bit. Let's go over the perspective thing first of all, and let's see, what should we use? Well, we'll just do something real simple. All right, so if I look at a castle, if I look at a building, now this is something that you would use when you're outside, when you're actually dealing over a distance. If you're inside of a room, or if I'm looking at something that's right in front of me, you don't get that distortion that you do over a length of space. So what I often do when I'm looking at something and trying to get an idea about how it's oriented, where's the corner? Am I looking more at the front? Am I looking at 2 sides of it? I kind of analyze it and try to kind of figure out what's going on. Maybe I'll use my black pen first. All right, so what I do is look at the bottom corner. So if this is kind of, I'll just indicate here, if this is where the ground plane is and the corner of a building is touching there, then, I'm kind of assuming that here's the corner of the building. It's going up a little bit, and, won't worry about how tall it is right now. What I want to do is see what is the angle as the wall goes away this way And as the wall goes away that way, what is that? What is there? So a lot of times you'll see people kind of sight over their pencils. So if you hold it all the way up to that corner, then you can kind of get an idea of what that angle is and what that angle is. Now, if you are seeing more of this side of the building, it's going to be, that angle is going to be a little less. If you see less of this side, then this is going to be greater. So it's a way to kind of get you started thinking about, what's going on. So then the horizon line is essentially, if you imagine a laser beam going out of your eyes, at what point is it look like it's in line with your eye, way off in the distance? And so if you follow this line up to where that is and follow that across that way, these are what are called vanishing points. So I'll say, okay, well, this building stops about there and is about that high. And again, I can kind of sight it and figure out how tall it is compared to how wide. But then here at the top, I mean, I can't see the roof of it. So this would kind of explain why if I come down to there, like the top and the bottom are parallel to each other. This is the vanishing point for all the parallel lines that are like that. So it fits like that, comes down like that. I decide how far back that is, figure out here. So you can see the way that that is starting to give you a system. So if you have some more buildings here, let's say you have another building and it is this far into space, but it is a little bit shorter. All right, if this would be the corner, you can't see the back of it and you can't see in through there, but you can see where it would come across there. And then maybe you have another tall building that is considerably taller than that one. That would come down here like that. It would come down to this one. So you can see how you can start building up a sense of how everything is working in a system. And then you could have a sidewalk, you have the curb, and that classic thing is either railroad tracks or telephone poles. So maybe I'd have a, some kind of a pole that's up here. Well, then, all the other poles would have to be the same size. So you can see the way that eventually, as you are kind of working on this, then you have a whole system, you'd have cars that, could be parked here. So these are little kind of ways to make sense of what you're looking at anyhow. All right, so that would be perspective. And you can get as involved with that as you want. You can do intuitive things with it. That's your, kind of a fixed point of view. Somebody like Cezanne, when they were doing a still life, he did a lot of them with apples and stuff. We'd kind of have this table like that, but then maybe you'd have the fruit arranged in through here like that and something else happening. But then this part of the table is kind of like that, as if he's looking at it from up above the sides. And then you kind of think about Picasso with, the faces that would have, it looks like 3 noses or 3 eyes or something like that. It's like drawing one figure from several different viewpoints. So you don't have to stick to something that is absolute and is a real highly developed structure, which is perspective was pretty well worked out in the Renaissance times. You could take something that's much more modern and kind of play against that. It's, entirely up to you to decide what you want to do. Okay, so let's look at, like the notion of, all right, so real quick, let me just kind of sketch in, I can't, kind of some castle shapes here. Arches. Okay, so again, just very preliminary. I decided to put this tower in through here. I got the tower in through here. Okay, so I'm looking at, so if I want to, I could make this part, this tower in through here. So if I go across here like that, and then I come up across like that, and across like that, I'm taking into account that there's a distance here. And so this is going to look a little bit shorter. And that's going to be a little bit higher, and things are going to start squeezing. The same thing with this. I might want to do something that's even more dramatic and, have the tower here. So part of it is blocking my view. Okay. So then, I can think about the mortar joints. If I'm, kind of closer here, I could be putting in more indications of where the mortar joints are. In through here, I might look, rather than the lines of the mortar joints, I could be, just putting in kind of like a couple little spots here of rectangles to kind of make it look a little bit more like the illusion of something rather than the specific part of it. Now, the trees, got this tree that would be the size that you would think if it were close up. This is a smaller tree, which you would assume, like even if I just kind of lay them, if I, again, that notion of what's at the bottom, here, we'll draw a line here. All right, so that there. So I'm going to push this up a little bit. And even on your screen, when you look at that, here, let's put it on a white piece of paper. I'll be very scientific about this. Okay, put that one here and then put this one up here. So when you look at it, the reality is that this is just manufactured to be a smaller tree, and this one's a little bit bigger. But if you kind of focus in just on this bit right in through here, your eyes will start kind of tricking a little bit, because now it looks like actually this one is farther back than this one. Okay, so that's something to consider when you're drawing, so that if I'm doing some kind of a bit of tree here, put my model in front of me here. That's another thing too, is that a lot of times if people are working in their sketchbooks and they're out, a lot of times they'll take those sketches, take them back to the studio, and then their studies, they're using those as a way to kind of start a painting or a drawing or something. And I think sometimes that, that the very quick sketches that you do sometimes have a lot more life and can be a lot more interesting than maybe something that you overwork. Okay. So I come back and think about throwing some shadow in there. I got some darker areas like in there. Again, I don't have like a really dark green in this set. So what I'm going to do is kind of in some of these shadow areas, I'm going to take the blue, which is a little bit darker than my green, and kind of work them in. Okay. Okay, let's see what we got here. I think there's a bit of brown even. Kind of start through. I don't want to get too fussy with any of this stuff because we still have a lot to cover. And I can also see, like a hint of some trunks and whatnot. Kind of come down here like this. So what I want to do with this is maybe leave a little bit of texture. I could even put a little texture on top of it, and it's going to start looking like bark. The same thing up here a little bit. You could come back and get a few highlights here and there. But then I can, kind of start putting a little bit of a texture, so you get a sense that, oh, like there's some leaves in there. So I can continue to develop it, but then when I want to make a tree look smaller, I'll probably go for a much, again, this is the only green I have, but I am going to, once I kind of get this in there, and so I'm going to just kind of hint at this one in the background. I'm not going to have like real sharp, crisp edges. I want that maybe to stay just as kind of a blur. And then I'm actually take my trunk here and draw it very lightly. I'm gonna go over it with some gray so I can kind of dull that out a little bit. And I might even put a little gray on top of it in through here. Now, one thing that you can do to gray a color down, you can add a complementary color. So I got to put just a tiny little bit of that on there. And as I kind of move that into it, it's going to knock it down a little bit. But the idea is that you've got the brighter colors here, then you're going to have less detail, and it's going to start to look, I'm going to make this a little bit taller so that I'll kind of heighten it a little bit more too. And then you have kind of some okay. You can get involved with, maybe we'll have another tree that's in this area. So if I put one that's a little bit smaller in through here, and then kind of put some shadows in through here so you can tell that that one is here. Another tree trunk in through here, maybe not quite. You start developing a sense of the overlapping, and then you have something in the distance, a tree that's a little bit smaller, a little farther up on the picture plane, a little less colorful. You know, you could have some bright flowery things in through here. You might have something in the distance, but maybe, you know, kind of not quite as bright as those. So if you kind of start playing around with those 6 things that I mentioned, then you can start developing, you know, kind of a feeling for space if you're working with a landscape, if you're working with a building and whatnot. Okay, so I know it's really kind of quick, and it's like, okay, so those are the basics. Those are something that when you go outside, you can start playing with. What I want to do now, maybe very quickly, is kind of switch over to being right on top of something and deal with the notion of botanical drawing in this sense. I enjoy doing landscapes every once in a while, but my passion, if I'm outside, is drawing flowers and things that are a little bit closer up. Okay, so I will get my sketchbook out here. So these are, as I mentioned, that if I'm not doing that type of thing, I'm just kind of working in it with, you know, developing little characters. But these are, you know, some of the studies that I've done, and I occasionally might turn them into a real drawing, but most of the times I just kind of enjoy working on it. It's very therapeutic. And I've also found, whether I'm doing these type of drawings or these type of drawings, if I'm on a park bench or something like that, not so much now because of social distancing and whatnot, but if I do go outside, I'm wearing my mask and people will come over and kind of look over my shoulder. But it's a great way just to people like to watch me draw. And I've noticed that, and I've talked to other artist friends, that that's part of the fun of going out and drawing, is that you end up, you know, just talking to people as they watch you. There's a group called Urban Sketchers. They'll go out as a group. They, you know, they have an organization. They get together. They'll organize events. So if you live in a city and you're kind of interested in going throughout the city and drawing things with a group of people, you could check with your local urban sketchers. So, you know, I just.
Franz, can you remind us the 6 things that you mentioned at the beginning of class?
Oh yeah. Size variation, big tree, little tree. You know, this is going to look like this one is farther in the distance. Overlap. So if you have one tree in front of the other one, this one's in front. If it's like this, then you know that this is a baby tree because it's in front of the big tree. Either that or else this is a really big tree. Position on the page, as I mentioned, if you kind of think about the bottom of the screen here, okay, then the farther you go up from the bottom, the more it's implied that this is going to be farther away than this one. Because if you'd measure from the bottom of the screen to the bottom of the tree, bottom of the screen to the bottom of the tree, the greater the distance, the farther away it is in terms of going back into space. All right, so that's position on the page. So we have size variation, overlap, position on the page, detail. You know, even at that, I mean, if I kind of put this right in front of the camera here, and then I have this, you know, farther away, you can see the individual spaces between the leaf shapes. You might even be able to, if I had it lit correctly, you could maybe even see some of the texture, the fake texture of the bark and stuff like that. So you have much more detail on something that is close to you than something that is far away. And then you have the linear perspective thing where you kind of figure out where your eye level is, and you have vanishing points. So if you have a point here, then all the lines that are parallel to that, you know, if you have a bigger building that's that high, then the top of the building that's parallel to that would go to that vanishing point, that would go there, that would go there. You know, all the windows would be doing the same thing. Okay, so that's linear perspective, and that was a system based on mathematics. It's actually based on geometry. In geometry, they tell you that parallel lines never meet together, but in the world of perspective, they actually do. So all the rules and regulations of parallel lines, the only thing that's kind of twisted is that they go to a vanishing point. I mean, you can actually measure in perspective that, you know, essentially, if I would have a scale here of 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, if I wanted to measure across here, I'd go to the same vanishing point. So this would be 1 foot, that would be 2 feet. And then as you go around, these little increments, as they go down, and this gets smaller and smaller, which, you know, this is what should happen. So that's linear perspective. And then aerial perspective or atmospheric perspective is, I really didn't, yeah, if you think about a lot of landscapes, you know, you might have really bright kind of, let's say in the back here, we're going to have kind of a nice hill that has a lot of trees and stuff in. Kind of up and through like this. Very quick here. It's our shrubbery in the background, or trees. Maybe even some over here. I could put a little dark in here to make them a little bit darker. So then, you know, if you had some kind of a mountain scene in the background, you're going to see that more subdued, even if it would have trees. So I'm going to just let a little bit of the dust from what I just did. But primarily, I'm going to be emphasizing more of a bluish and grayish. So that's going to make it look more in the distance. I'm not going to have a lot of sharp edges, whereas like the tree in the front, you know, I could have you know, implication that there's texture here of blocks of leaves. But by the time you get back here, it's just going to have a blush of kind of bluish color, and it's not going to be the real bright colors that you might have in the front. You know, especially if you're kind of thinking about as the fall's coming, then, you know, have a lot of bright colors here, but then they're going to look more a little brownish and a little cooler in the background. So those are the 6 guides that you can use in order to imply that you're working on something that has a deep space to it. All right, so these now that we're zooming in, so to speak, on Zoom, now that we're zooming in on individual plants, I'm always fascinated by how just intriguing they are, even leaves. So I started playing around with some more tropical leaves. I was down in Florida and I was looking at different things. Then these are plants that I was going to put outside for us to draw today, but unfortunately, yeah, it was raining. So what I want to do is I've started this drawing and I thought maybe I'd work on it a little bit more, but we'll bring this one out first and you can just kind of see, and I'll talk a little bit about working with these Pitt pens. So I don't know if that's going to obscure. Well, anyhow, you can look at the plant. It's a decorative cabbage. I don't know if decorative cabbages are edible, so I might have a salad after we're done. But let me, I'll draw side by side, kind of use this one. That way I don't have to put the plant next to us. But the way that I work with these Pitt pens, and what's nice about the Pitt pens, you can get a large set of them like I have over here, or you could get wallet sets. So if you know that you're going to be doing a lot of landscapes, there are pens and colors that are selected, thinking, well, you know, here's some basic colors for if you're working on a landscape. These are just the basic rainbow colors, and these are more of kind of earth colors. I find that if I take a couple of these sets with me, or I've got some of my favorite colors, and then I'll kind of work on them. And essentially, the way that I did this particular decorative cabbage, I started with my lightest color, sketched that in first. And so I have a very nice light blue. And when I'm looking at the cabbage, it isn't totally symmetrical. And that's part of it, setting up your drawing. I can look at it and say, okay, if I'm looking straight down at it, it's almost like these concentric circles as the leaves grow around it. If I'm looking at it a little bit at an angle, then this becomes a little bit more eccentric. All right. And so I might see it more like this. And then so the appearance of the distance between this layer leaves and that is a little bit more compressed in the back. And as it comes towards me, it looks like it gets a little bit bigger. And that, okay. So then, you know, obviously it isn't a completely circle like that. So if I start looking at it and I can see that, you know, I've got this is the outer leaf here, and I have another leaf that's kind of in through here. So this is just the way that I sketch it in, and doing it in a darker color so you can see it. But, you know, I've got some lighter ones that are pretty easy to cover up. So once I get that key color down in through there, then I'll start working to a darker color, and then until I start have just the shadows that I'm left. So maybe the best thing to do is actually, this is a different plant, and I've got that right here. Yeah, I'll kind of put it over.
Friends, we've had a couple of folks asking what the specific brand of sketchbook that you're using is.
Oh, this is, these are made by Legion Paper. I guess this way. Legion Paper, it's, I meant every time I do one of these workshops, I can't stress enough the importance of the paper. You know, you want to get a fairly heavy paper, especially if you're using these kind of pens and some other materials, because you want them to be able to take a lot of reworking and absorb. It's 100% cotton fiber, so it's very absorbent and it's very strong and it's archival. I like it also because it has a little bit of a tooth to it. So if I'm working with pastel or color pencil, I can take advantage of the texture to it. And I like the spiral part of it too, because when I open it up, you know, you can get it so it's flat. And then they also make sketch pads and regular paper, drawing paper that I use a lot too. It's just like it's a real good quality paper, and you don't want to chintz on the paper. You don't want to think, okay, well, I want to get cheap paper because I spent a good amount of money on my materials. The paper is every bit as important as the paint or the markers or the ink or the pencils, whatever it is that you buy. It's the platform that all this is going on. And if you don't use good materials, then you're going to be putting all your energy, and you're all excited about doing it, but if you're defeated because you have bad materials, then that's a real crime. I think that you deserve to have the materials that are going to help you do your best. So that's why I like using this particular paper, because it is a nice quality and it pretty much does everything I want. Stays flat, doesn't buckle up, doesn't bleed through to the other side. Okay, well, let's I hope that answered that question. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of work on this leaf and actually work on the real drawing. And so I'm starting off now. These are these markers, these drawing pens are an Indie ink formulation. So when they dry, they're going to be permanent. And I'm looking at one of these leaves. Let's see if I can get one in. Yeah. A leaf that's similar to this one. And the reason that I picked this particular plant is I like the patterning of it. And the patterning, if you're kind of careful, and I sketched this out, I forgot to mention that I have a light pencil. I used like a very light touch on a 2B graphite pencil. And I sketched this out and I kind of indicated where the stem is. Okay, so I'm kind of moving these around. And I'm starting off light. Okay, so I've got the vein system. I'll hold it up maybe a little closer so you can, there it is. Okay, so I have that part done first. All right, and then there's a kind of real light pink color that I will start next, and it pretty much fills in around those areas. It kind of has like this light color, and then now I'm going over several parts of this that end up getting a little more vibrant. Okay, and then it stays kind of pale in the center. And then there's what I like about this plant is now that there's a green, and it's not just a light green, it's kind of a real dark green. And I'm also kind of looking to see where there might be a little bit of that kind of pinkish color that's floating in the middle of the green. So I'll leave a couple areas for that. So the harder I press down on these markers, the wider the tip gets, so that if I just use very little pressure, I can get a real thin line. And then if I use more pressure, I can get a thicker line. So I like the idea that do that. I don't know if that showed up or not. This may be a little too delicate for, but you can see as I do each individual leaf that it's starting to really kind of come together as an entire plant now. I'm going to leave just a tiny little bit of a thin white line between the leaves. Okay, I'll come down and through there. So I could then go back with another marker, start getting some of the shadows, some of the darker things in there. That's a little bit more intense red. So it's just like gradually building your color up from light and kind of pale to more intense and more vibrant. Okay, so I think that'll kind of give you an idea of the way that you can develop this. So let's flip over and I'll just give a real basic kind of notion of maybe how to start. Instead of using a pencil, maybe I'll just kind of want something that's going to show up. So, well, we're working with green, so I'll use the lighter gray. Okay, if I look at a leaf, if I look at it straight on, it might be that shape. All right, so if you can kind of think about the way that maybe what size box could you put that leaf in? So it is touching. Okay, so now if you're looking at the leaf and it's at an angle, so instead of being a rectangular box, then it might be like a leaf that is kind of more like that, all right? So it's the same thing. You kind of look to see where maybe those 4 points are. So if you want to draw a leaf and you're having a hard time figuring out how to make it look angled, think about what kind of a box it could fit in. And a box drawn at an angle is more like this kind of rhombus shape or this parallelogram. So the same thing that if it's really sticking up high, when it's really at an angle, then it's going to be even more severe perhaps. And again, it's just coming from here to there, and it'll kind of work on the foreshortening for you. So you go from the straight on thing. Now, then you start thinking about, okay, so here is the spine. The spine would be like that. And then, you know, this is kind of assuming it's a flat leaf, but then you can start to finesse it a little bit and think, if I look at some of these leaves, instead of being flat, they kind of curl up a little bit. So then what I can do then is start thinking about, all right, so if I'm looking at a leaf and maybe I can observe that I see a lot more of that side and a little less of that side. So it could be then that the spine's still there, but the leaf is curling up. So here's the side of this one, and then it curls up in that way. Then look to see the way that the, you know, these little, let's see, where is it? Everything's backwards. Oh, here we go. So this gives you a directional notion too. They aren't just kind of, if you look straight onto it, they may be like that. But if you have one that is like, you know, kind of pointing up, these are going to be maybe more something like that. And then these are going to be seen more from, you know, it's going to, you'll see a little bit of it here. Actually, the leaf I'm looking at is almost right halfway. So you barely can see the spine. And so then what you're doing is you're seeing these that are on the outside edge here that are kind of going in. So it's more of a, here we go. So contrary, this comes and you can't see it, but it doubles up to that spine, and the same thing here. So these on the outside look more like that in contrast to what's happening in through there. So just kind of laying the thing out, you can start doing some little lines like that to give you ideas. So then this might be, you know, since it's away from the light, all right, I can see some of those veins that are in there. Okay, and they'll kind of start angling around a little bit. Okay, so that's going to be like that. And then the inside of the leaf might be a little bit lighter. I'm kind of using goofy colors here, but I'm trying to make them show up. Actually, I meant to make this bigger so you could actually see it. Let's switch. Real quick. Let's make this a lot bigger. Okay, so I've determined that I've got kind of a leaf. Okay, and the center, you can kind of start to see where that center is about right there. And then this one kind of flattens out like that, and then comes around like that, and then swoops, oops, swoops down around like that. Okay, that's a little bit bigger. Okay, so this, okay, so what you're actually doing is seeing the underneath side of the leaf here, and a little bit of the spine. I'm trying to style this a little bit so that, you know, it's not more like a diagram than any particular rendering here. Okay. Okay, and then I kind of lose it into another leaf is overlapping, but the stem kind of comes, I like that. Okay, now the edge is just has this kind of really nice reddish, kind of put a little bit of that on it. And then there's some that's just a little bit at the bottom of that vein. And then instead of it being like a real bright yellow, because it's underneath and the light is actually coming through and illuminating it, the bottom part is more kind of like a brownish color. And then we get into kind of like this yellowish green in through here. Okay, so you can kind of start seeing the way that you get a sense that that's a leaf that is kind of folded in the center. Now, from the way that I'm looking at it, it's almost like kind of an avocado color on the inside. It's a little bit richer in through here, maybe not quite that. So I can knock that down a little bit by, it's still going to have a green cast to it, but I don't want it to be quite that real festive green. That kind of evergreen candle color. Now these markers, one of the things I like about them too is that they're transparent, so that I can, the more I layer them, the more I can affect the color. So now that's more of kind of like this dullish green that I can see when I look underneath there. Slightly brighter there. So test that out. All right, we'll go in through here. And again, I kind of look at this particular plant. Krista looked it up for me, and I think it was a Petra something or other. It has these kind of, they remind me of church windows on the inside. They get these kind of little shapes. And I make them a little bit dark because what happens is that the inside part of the leaf is really shiny. So I'm going to have a lot of reflections there. And I'll show you another tool you can use for that. And then once you get down here, it's almost all that's pretty much just one color in through here. This is a little bit brighter green in through here. So again, this is the way that I start. I start blocking the main shapes out, and I try to get a base color established. Now, until these markers, the inks have set up completely, they're still a little bit malleable. So like if I put one color down, and I want to alter that a little bit. If I put that right next to it, then there's a real sharp edge. But if I take the lighter color and start in the darker color and then start working over, you can see the way you can get that to blend, and then you get your finger in there. And that's the other thing I like about this particular paper. It has some sizing in it. And what sizing does is it protects the fiber of the paper from immediately absorbing whatever pigment you have there. So it gives you a little bit of time that you can rework it so that if you want to get a blend together, instead of the paper just sucking that up and not being able to move it around, that little bit of sizing that is on the surface of the paper allows you to be able to blend that. Now, you know, like in about half an hour stuff, when that dries, there's nothing I'll be able to do to change that. But this gives me an opportunity to be able to blend things a little bit. And, you know, the same thing that if I want to have like a yellow, perhaps, as soon as I put it on top of that green, I have a much brighter green. And then I could take, I forget which And I can just take my finger and kind of blend that together a little bit. Come back with that, go over it with this. And if you get a little bit that darker color on this one, it's just a matter of taking a Kleenex or a paper towel or something, and you can kind of wipe it, or you can go over on another one that's back to being plenty yellow again. Okay, so all right, I'm looking at my leaves again, and I'm starting to see a little bit of that coming in through here. Okay, at that point, I'm starting to get it to look the way that I want it. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to get another. The other thing you can do too is that if I have one layer of that color down, once it dries a little bit, then if I put another layer on top of it, it automatically gets darker because it's got two layers of it. Let that dry a little bit. So I can even, with one of these pens, I can go from dark to light just by how many times I overlap. So as I'm looking at this, then I can see that I've got some kind of shadowy shapes that are in through here and comes up like that because it is curved a little bit away from the light. But then I'm going to leave kind of a lighter edge here. And then it is kind of dark on the sides of these things in a couple of places. Okay, so that's working out nicely. Okay. Now, after I let that dry a little bit, and the other thing too is if I want to kind of start playing around with, making those edges show up, if I put something lighter on either side of it, whether it's just a color, light color, whatever, it's going to make that pop a little bit more. I want this to be a little bit darker in through here yet, so I can use a darker green. Or if I don't want to use green, maybe I could use like a brown. And a lot of this too is just experimenting. See what you can do. See what happens when you add this. Okay, yeah, I want those shadows to be a little bit darker. And so you'd expect this vein maybe to be a little bit darker. So I'll go over it with this so it's not as yellow. Okay. So that's really starting to look the way that I want it to be. Now, the real magic is you can also get, this is like a big boy. This is a really fat tipped one. And so when it comes to putting highlights, it's like whiteout for artists. So if I want to make that look like it has a bit of a highlight, I'll put that down. I'll let that dry a little bit. As soon as that's dry, I'll put some more on top of it. So this is another one of those things that the more layers you put, the more opaque. But what I'm looking at, this shiny leaf now, up and through here, this part is really reflecting a lot of light. In fact, this entire edge up at the top is much lighter. So I can use my beefy white. And so you can see the way that is starting to lift that up and give it a little more. And then as it comes down up until where it hits that shadow, then I've got, and what I can do is I can just kind of tap that a little bit with my finger, and I can move it around a little bit so it blends just a bit. So a lot of what I do is just layer and layer and layer, and then it kind of, I'm looking to see where it gets really bright. Up there, there. They also make, it's around, oh yeah, I think it's right here. They make a smaller version that's nice to have for blending a little bit and to be able to put some smaller marks. But I find that this works a lot better just because it's really juicy. Okay. Now after that dries just a little bit, then I'll come back. Well, as soon as that is nice and dry, then I'll come back and maybe touch a few areas up to crisp up the edges. And I can also, I like to pick some up on my fingers a little bit. A little texture, because it isn't a solid white shape. It has a little bit of a texture to it. So I can kind of put that around. Get that to blend over on top of the white. And I can decide, where I want there to be really bright highlights and then where I want it to kind of taper into just kind of like a little glistening. And the more I work on it, then the more I can kind of get it to start looking like the leaf. That one is just a little bit more like that. And I'll go over it with the white one more time. So maybe I can get a little bit close to the camera so that that better. Okay, well, maybe, oh, here we go, yeah. All right, so it's starting to get some form. I still, contrast is good. If I can get a little more contrast in it, I might take a darker gray and then start kind of trying to put a little darker in through here. And again, I can kind of push that a little bit with my finger to get it to blend. And then it's going to start making the part pop out a little bit more because I'm defining that edge with a darker shadow. So it does take a while, but if you keep on layering it and playing with it, and to me, I just get totally lost in this. I could spend hours without even noticing that the time has gone by because I'm always trying to get, okay, I can do a little more detail here. I can do something here. And at the same time, I get every bit as much fun out of doing something like this outside as well. So even though even if we had gone outside of my front porch, I just kind of live in a normal neighborhood. People have gardens and stuff. There's lots to draw, but you get so lost in your own imagination. If you're here, if you're, in merry old England at the castle or whatever. And I think if that's the most important thing is that you really sink into that creative, imaginative part of your existence, your mind, your soul, and you get so lost in it. So that if you've got some, materials, and once you get started, there's so much stuff you can do, whether you're on your own front stoop or if you're off in someplace more exotic. So does anybody have any questions? I mean, it was a lot to kind of cover very quickly. I would have easily just started to draw one of those leaves, and we could have been here for an hour just drawing one leaf. But I think I tried to show you as many little different things as I could think of. So if there are any last questions or anything, or is everybody happy? I am. I got to draw.
Don't see any questions, so I think you did a great job.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, everybody, whether you're looking outside your window or you actually get a fun place to go, take your art materials with you and enjoy it. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Franz. Thank everyone for joining us. Have a good